Okay, Georgi Dinkov episode. What is this podcast called? Gender of Energy number 81. Georgi Dinkov, how are you, sir?
Not bad. Still, still afloat. still relatively sane.
Yeah. Okay, so
still entertained.
We took March off, and what is new in your life during that time?
Let's see. I released quinine. I mean, that's basic. I don't know if you've seen that.
We'll talk about that.
As another product.
But I meant deep down in your life, Georgi.
Deep down in my life, I don't know. It's empty and cold. No, I don't think much has changed here. Basically, DC is back to, I don't want to say normal. Is this airy sort of like reminiscence of what things used to be like, right? Mm-hmm. But then everybody here kind of senses that we're going to see something else soon. But the masks are gone. The vaccination mandates are gone. Pretty much you can kind of only, you can sense there was a pandemic only by the fact that certain restaurants now are stubbornly basically continuing to demand that people show them vaccination records in order to go inside. Mm-hmm. And I witnessed several people get into physical fights with actual restaurant owners or operators or whatever they are. And that's pretty much the only thing by which you can tell there was a pandemic in the city. Other than that, I don't know if you've seen the news. I mean, basically it looks like Biden is going to get thrown under the bus. There was this big meeting when Obama went to the White House. It was kind of sad. Basically, Biden was out of it and was wandering around, kind of looking around, not even knowing where he is. And he went and tapped Obama on the shoulder, and that guy didn't even turn around to acknowledge him. He just kept shaking hands with others.
Ray called Obama a test tube CIA baby.
A test tube CIA baby?
Yeah. He was groomed for the presidency by the CIA, basically.
I wouldn't be surprised if he is an actual still active operative or whatever. You know what the CIA calls the president?
Oh.
A non-employee with a security clearance on a need-to-know basis only.
Makes sense to me. There's a reporter named Wayne Madsen, and he did some really good investigative work on Obama's background and his mother, who worked also for the CIA, and then the Sukarno-Suharto Indonesian genocide. So I can't remember who's the bad one. I think it was Sukarno. And anyways, Obama's dad, his second dad, worked for Sukarno during the genocide. And then his mom, I think her name's Lee Dunham, brought baby 8-year-old Obama to Indonesia during the genocide, during that time.
That's why his name is Saitoro or something,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Barack Saitoro Obama or something like that.
But who would bring their child to a war zone
unless you're not you're guaranteed safety? Yeah, the only way this can happen is if you're part of the game.
Yeah. But he does some good. Anyways, okay, so you were saying Biden being confused when Obama came back.
Oh, he's out of it. I mean, basically, I don't know if you've noticed, and I don't know if you've seen the speeches about Ukraine several times. He basically said that Putin is getting ready to invade Russia.
That makes sense to me.
Several other flops like that, and basically they don't even try to correct them anymore. And those things, even the fact checkers who are usually on Biden's side, they're now basically because apparently they're seeing this chatter that Biden is out of it, and they're fact checking that. Did he say Putin will invade Russia? And then the verdict is partially true.
I think that was a zero hedge, the fact checking that he was confused. I mean, how ridiculous can it possibly get? Okay.
But it's the whole idea. They're kind of telling you whatever you see, that's not reality. Mm-hmm. We will define it for you. And that's part of, that's the game that I've been playing, and they're trying to actually get us to fully commit to.
I'm sure there's 100 Orwell quotes about changing reality and shaping men's minds to, there's that CIA quote, and it's we'll know our job is done when everything the public believes is false, and that's
false. But I don't think it's a CIA quote. I think it was wasn't it a Rockefeller quote or?
No, I'm positive it was because I investigated it a little bit.
Oh yeah, CIA director, former CIA director.
I can't remember which one, but the woman in the room swears that he said it, but she's the only source for that. Anyways, okay, so what else?
Let's see. Getting close to finalizing the steroid testing in nail and hair.
We'll talk about Idealabs. Wait, anything else in your life?
I mean, what can a guy with 2 kids and like basically 2 jobs do? I'm if I'm not in bed by 9, then I'm out basically drinking beer until 2 a.m. in the morning. But that second thing doesn't happen very often. I wish it did.
Okay, here's a question: what about the grocery stores? Has anything changed in DC?
Well, I mean, I think we mentioned this before. Basically, the dairy aisle in most stores is getting progressively smaller. And it's getting replaced by all this plant crap, cashew milk, almond milk, oat milk, hemp milk. I don't even know how they can be called. Is it even legally allowed to be called milk? Like, wasn't there some kind of a lawsuit that said if you say milk, it has to contain milk, right? So it has to be like a milk-like product. But they don't even bother doing that. They're just saying hemp milk. That's what it says on the carton. So that's one thing. Another, I mean, I'm looking at the more like. So the Whole Foods, which used to have, they would have like 2 separate sections with cooked food every day, and they were actually changing the types of food every day. Now, basically, it's gotten down to a single section of cooked food, and they're cooking the exact same thing, and it's really crap, and it hasn't changed in the last 6 months. They have maybe 4 or 5. I wouldn't say 4 or 5. They have like 2 types of meat, and actually the meat dishes are kind of been declining. It's usually more often like maybe 5 days out of the week they have like an entirely plant-based menu, and then on the weekend they'll have like some kind of a meat, and that's it. But and those things keep repeating every week. And like when I ask them like what's going on, they says shortages. Okay, so why, where are you guys getting your food from? They're like, well, whatever we used to get it from, it's no longer viable. So we're back to basically whatever is accessible here within the United States. And that's how you can see that productive capacity, I guess, is declined because they're down to some very limited choices. And when I asked them, like, do you think this is going to change anytime soon? They said, nope. Management is kind of saying, like, keep the costs low, basically, raise prices, by the way. Well, that's the other thing. I would say the prices of milk and dairy in general have gone up by about 20 to 30%, and the packages have shrunk. Like if it's cheese or like the carton. I don't think they can change the cartons because it says like, I don't know, 2 quarts or whatever, right? And I guess they can start putting a little bit less in each carton, but I think that's probably illegal. But the actual packages for the cheese, because they actually put how many grams of cheese are inside, net weight, and those have declined by like another 20 to 30%. So if you add these two, you're basically up to about 40 to 60% inflation on dairy products, and most of the other things have gone up as well. Like beer prices have gone up, meat prices are through the roof. Actually, meat I think has gone up the most, more than even dairy. And empty shelves. I mean, things that I used to buy this really cheap brand of Whole Foods water, spring water, and because my wife and I just like the taste. All the other spring water brands that they had kind of like didn't sit well with us, and now that thing's gone. Basically, like as soon as it arrives in the store, first of all, the supplies are much smaller, and then the shelves get cleared up in a day, and I have to sort of like keep checking every day to see if they have this brand of water and buy a few gallons. Otherwise, it's gone. So Whole Foods is a shadow of its former self. I wouldn't actually call it a luxury grocery store anymore, like a high-end grocery store anymore. It used to be. I would say now Whole Foods these days is what Safeway looked like when I first came into the United States in the late 90s.
I mean, I can't remember when we started talking about supply chain disruptions and food shortages, but I mean, it must have been in 2021 or so. But Biden saying there's going to be food shortages to like apparently stick it to Russia or something is just crazy. And then so I went to a town over called, I think, Querétaro, and they have a place called Gourmet Market, which is similar to Whole Foods. And I would say that like the dairy aisle, 75% of it was like oat milk and fake milks. Yeah. And then probably 25 was just the normal cow milk. And then also I can't remember what we bought, but it eyeballed, when I eyeballed it, it was like $50 and it was like 120. And so I was like, I think it was like 2 bags of stuff, and I was shocked on how much it was. Yeah, man. I can't. Yeah.
So the basically the sanctions that the West imposed on Russia are destroying the West And Biden's way out of it is like, yeah, we're going to stick it to Russia by starving.
But that's the phony narrative.
That's hell of a strategy.
Like they've been destroying the supply chain since 2020, and now they're blaming it on Russia.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's on purpose. But I think they're also trying to be careful not to destroy too much, because at some point, like if this population gets sufficiently hungry, you're looking at Arab Spring in America, and that thing cannot be controlled. So it's like, so just like they want a controlled demolition, right? Like as we spoke with Ray, but I think they're getting to the point where the demolition is not very controlled, and now because any war is a wild card, you never know what actually is going to transpire, and now with the sanctions backfiring, you can't control how it would affect and which section of the economy will collapse first if Russia stops supplying fuel, right? Or like these the fossil fuels, coal, gas, oil, you name it, wheat, right? And I think now they're trying to foment some kind of trouble in the Middle East. I don't know if you've seen the news about Lebanon. They're about to like have a civil war there out of lack of electricity and food. So it's basically I think this is their plan B. If things get out of control, supply shortage wise, they're going to start like a civil war, another movement, like another revolution somewhere in the Middle East, just to get people's attention away from it. Anyways, I don't think they know what they're doing. I don't think they have a good control of the situation. They probably know what they want, but at the end of the day, even the powers that be cannot fully control people's reaction and how things will turn out at the end.
Okay, so just before we move on, people hate when we talk about this stuff, but don't offer any solutions. So are you doing anything differently, just your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I bought some silver, I bought some gold. I'm not going to talk about any weapons. I mean, but you can get the idea. Other than that, I mean, look, as we discussed before, you cannot save everything you have. So just have enough to basically be, I don't know, sufficient for a few months. And then if things don't improve after that, I don't think your possessions that you used to have before would have made it any better. In fact, they may make you a target of whatever marauding bands start running around and basically killing everything in their path. So, that was pretty much Ray's advice as well. Have some money in cash and in precious metals, and maybe even a little bit of Bitcoin if you believe in it. And then, make sure you have like the necessities in terms of like thyroid, progesterone, antibiotics, right? Those are sort of like, first aid supplies. And that's pretty much it. I don't see what else can you do. I mean, again, it's unpredictable how this will play out. If things continue to go down this way, ultimately we're looking at World War III, and I don't think anybody can protect themselves from, all-out nuclear war. What are you going to do? There's enough nuclear. There's enough nuclear power in the world to destroy the world about 150 times over, every square inch of it.
Georgie, you're neglecting the fact that I can get under my desk if a nuclear bomb goes off.
That was the advice they were giving people. Yes, I know. Yeah, how comforting.
Good stuff. Something, I don't know if this is true. I should probably fact check it with the fact checkers, but in like the 1920s or something, apparently people had like boxes of gold and silver and they were trying to trade it for food. And so I thought that kind of goes back to Ray's point that I think like the first time we ever asked him, like, what can we do about this? He was like, try to grow your own food because that's going to be the most important thing. And I mean, again,
not at this point though, because I think if you start growing your own food and then things start collapsing truly, you immediately become a target. I mean, they're going to come and take it. So have some things like the processed food, some canned food, or like that thing that Walmart used to say. Actually, they still sell it, but it's sold out. I think I sent you the link. They call it astronaut food.
Oh, yeah.
And it's basically powdered eggs, powdered milk, which Ray mentioned the powdered milk, rice, sugar, flour, and a few other things like that don't really spoil, but they're also specially packaged. And you can get, they used to offer only like a 12-month supply, but because it cost used to cost like $5,000, I guess they thought it was too expensive. So now they've broken it down to a 6-month and 3-month supply. So if you can get yourself like a 3 to 6 month supply of that food and keep it somewhere safe where you think you can get to it if needed, when needed, right? And then it gets a little bit of like those, hard currencies, which have always had some value. Some people say, well, why bother with both gold and silver? Well, because gold, because of the higher price, like if you buy these bars that are like 3 ounces each or 4 ounces each, you're gonna have a trouble, using that to shop for things, because for most of these things you need only a small chunk of it, right? So silver is a lower price, so you can get these like silver dollars, and you can. I think they're worth like, I don't know, $20-$30 right now or something.
Yeah, about $30.
Yeah, so you can use that to like basically as your petty change to buy things on a daily basis, and that's about it in terms of protection. Until we have a clarity on whether the elite will collapse or not, then I don't think you can make any long-term plans. I mean, you can at best make a plan 3 to 6 months out in the future. Anything more than that, you're probably daydreaming.
Great stuff. Okay, let's talk about a few articles, then we'll go into Idealabs and jump into that. Okay, which ones were the most, what did you get the most feedback on? Like the popularity?
Let's see. Actually, it's a really small, I have to load it up on my screen too.
Oh, is it too small?
Yeah, because the screen is split into two. I'm occupying the entirety of the one half, and then on the other one, actually, I'm seeing myself and you, and like you. Okay, there you go. Let's start from the bottom. I think
okay. So vaccine inhibits oxidative phosphorylation.
Oh yeah, that to me was like pretty shocking. And then when I posted on Twitter immediately censored, but then uncensored it. I think an MD or somebody commented, and then may have. I would like to think that's what got it uncensored. But basically, it changes. It puts the cell in the metabolic state that was basically as Warburg-like as neuroglioblastoma, which is one of the deadliest cancers you can get. And that I think happened in a matter of only 48 hours. So we're getting more and more evidence. Unfortunately, again, in vitro, right? It would be nice to have some in vivo studies, but I think most scientists are probably afraid at this point it's too political, too sensitive to do an in vivo study, and probably waiting to see how things will unfold. But yeah, the few doctors that I talked to about this, they said, another in vitro study. We don't want to see any more of these. If you want to convince us, and I know I won't, show us an in vivo study or, ideally in humans. Well, I don't have one yet, but the evidence keeps accumulating. Maybe I should email Dr. Bitterman. What an appropriate name for a person like that.
The vegan guy.
Say it again?
Is that the Avi, the vegan dude?
Yeah. Isn't his last name Bitterman?
I really don't know. I'd have to double check.
Very apt. It is. I'm pretty sure it is Bitterman. But he said that there was only one in vitro study. He said he would bet his life that it will never be another in vitro study. Mm-hmm. And now there's like at least 6, I think. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. But did you see that they stopped reporting on the splitting the data into vaccinated versus unvaccinated?
No, tell me about it.
CDC did. CDC decided that they'll no longer, when they publish the data, they'll no longer provide the breakdown of like how many new cases are vaccinated versus unvaccinated. They said it will confuse the public as to the efficacy of the vaccines. And the NHS, of course, it will, right? Well, it will convince only the people who are blindly believing in those vaccines to start with. Yeah. And then the NHS, the National Health System in the UK, which is the equivalent, I guess, of CDC, did the exact same thing. Germany started doing the same thing. I think Netherlands is about to start doing the same thing. So little by little, basically, the world's health agencies, if anybody had any doubts that this is all staged, now they're saying, we're only going to publish new COVID cases, but we're not going to tell you which ones were vaccinated and which ones were not. How am I supposed to assert the vaccine efficacy then, right? Well, we're going to do an internal analysis, Georgi, and then we will announce that to your layman ass, or whatever. I have
go ahead.
Yeah, that's really. I mean, that's where we stand right now. I think another really bad thing that started to come out recently is that I think now they're starting to confirm the effects on fertility as well.
Okay, we're back. My doorbell rang. Georgi, continue what you were saying.
I was saying that in addition to the effects of inhibiting also oxidative phosphorylation to the point of making the person's cells behave as if they were neuroglioblastoma cells, now we're starting to see evidence of the vaccine's effects on fertility as well. And I think Ray spoke about the vaccine, the spike protein containing the sequence for syncytin, right?
Yeah.
Which was potentially could cause autoimmune reaction in women to the fetus. But now we're starting to see something that was also like forecasted that it may happen because the spike protein, one of the organs where it accumulates the most is the male gonads.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading this blog post by a doctor who was basically trying to, him and his wife were trying to conceive a child. And he went and did all the tests and he looked perfectly healthy, at least reproductively. And then got double jabbed and basically his testosterone levels drop below the low end of normal, which we know is already even the medium range is way too low, and he became fully infertile. And he basically says, I even though I am a firm believer in vaccines, I would like to believe that they're helpful. There is nothing else that I have done that could cause this dramatic decline and basically make him fully infertile. So they went from trying naturally to potentially considering in vitro, and even that was basically, he thought it would be a long shot.
So you're saying you don't want accumulation of spike proteins in your gonads?
Yeah, how weird, huh? I mean, like this nice thing, this fuzzy feeling of spikes in your balls. Who wouldn't want that?
It's really crazy. There's a Telegram channel that I follow. I think it's called COVID-19 vaccine side effects. And the whoever runs it is pretty meticulous on the stories they'll kind of post. But if I didn't follow that channel, I'd be kind of oblivious to the side effects because you don't see them anywhere unless you're talking to somebody that feels like they were harmed. But it's like staggering the amount of horrific side effects it has. But again, it's not front and center unless you're specifically looking for it. And you can
actually start seeing it on PubMed. They're starting to publish case studies,
mm-hmm.
And those are not being retracted. So, but here's the thing: what percentage of the population does read PubMed on a regular basis, and what percentage of that percentage will actually specifically start looking for case studies on vaccine side effects? Right? Not many. And now with like the mainstream media not publishing a breakdown by vaccination status. Unless you're really like a person who is looking for trouble, so to speak, who already suspects nefarious things,
like yourself
in the vaccine. Yeah, exactly, like myself, troublemaker. Then basically you wouldn't know about these things, but they are published. If you go to PubMed and type COVID-19 vaccine case study, you'll see that there are hundreds of them already, and some of them are about lethal side effects, right? Usually anaphylactic reaction, but like some of them are about blood clots. They're causing, lethal stroke or heart attack. And now I'm also starting to see, but they're saying it's a suspected cause because you can't really prove, cause and effect because the medicine says, hey, the only way to prove cause and effect is if you spend $2 billion and do a double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trial, which, by the way, we weren't required to do.
Yeah.
So you, Georgi, and everybody else who wants to prove that the vaccines are bad, you have to spend that money and you have to prove it. And guess what? If you start getting anywhere close to proving that the vaccines are bad, people in your control group will start mysteriously dying, committing suicide, and whatnot. So impossible, basically. So all you can do is see the case studies, and after a while, if there's so many of them that say that the only thing that a patient changed and made a male or a female infertile is this vaccine, nothing else drastically changed their lifestyle. Well, as they say in the CA, when there is any doubt, there is no doubt.
This is legitimate speculation, but people are saying, are you following how they want to move Ukrainian refugees into the U.S. and other places like Ireland?
They've already moved them, aren't there? Didn't the U.S. accept like 50,000 of them since the war started?
Is that true? I think Ireland was supposed to accept like 200,000 or something like insane. But
they want to, but I think they've already accepted like 50,000.
Mm-hmm. But people were saying that would offset deaths and stuff by the vaccine. It would be very...
That's true.
It would be very confusing to see what was going on with the population when it's being replaced by alleged Ukrainian refugees.
I just don't trust anything that the CDC or even the Census Bureau publishes at this point. If you look deep enough, you will see that almost everything that they report is based on a model. Mm-hmm. At some point, they either consider the facts of reality too unpopular and unpleasant to publish, or they're too expensive to basically like count and collect and analyze properly. So they're doing a model because the model you can basically throw away 90% of the data and work with those 10% that you like, and not spend a ton of money and effort to collect those 10%. And that's what the government likes.
Phony models are my favorite, so I really enjoy that CDC content. So.
Well, it's a tautology, because all models are phony, but as Eisenhower used to say, all models are wrong, but some models are useful. So phony model is already a tautology. So the question is it useful or not? The only question.
Fair enough. Okay, let's talk about one more article, then we'll dive into Idealabs. Which another one was popular? Aging and disease are same process, driven by low metabolism.
We can do that, but
cocaine,
it's
estrogen.
Probably not surprising to people at this point. But the reason I like this is that there's a new center being set up at UCLA. Unfortunately, they're still talking about genes. But the good news is that this lady that is setting up this center or institute, I forgot what exactly the name was at UCLA. She's basically saying, look, there is an exorbitant amount of evidence, and we've known this for a while, apparently. She's like, well, look, every doctor knows that as you age, your chance of getting any disease grows. And then beyond a certain age, it starts to grow exponentially. And that's why eventually, as they say, the death rate stubbornly holds at 100% for all people. So basically she's saying, well, why is that, right? And then she's saying it's the mitochondria. It's because all of these diseases that we're seeing, they're essentially micro images of aging in a specific tissue or organ. And she's saying the way to reverse it, the way to treat these basic diseases is, why don't we attack the actual ultimate disease and probably the cause of them all, which is aging, which is just another way of saying, and she actually says that, low metabolism, right? But instead of saying, okay, let's see what's blocking metabolism, how we can restore it, talk about thyroid, things like that, none of that is discussed. It's basically, let's see if we can edit this gene with CRISPR, or we can silence this gene, or, unsilence that gene, and maybe this will somehow magically solve the problem. Now, I don't know if she's doing that because she has to please the federal funders, because all of this is with government money, obviously, right? So I take it as half and half good news and half bad news. The good news is that now that they're openly admitting that aging and disease are both the same process, both caused by declining mitochondrial function. The bad news is that they're not looking at the causes, the ultimate cause, or at least they're looking in the wrong place. They don't believe it's environmental. They believe it's coming into from your genes. And maybe that's where the money is right now. I mean, in fact, I think that's where the money is right now, because there's tons of money being thrown by the government, if it's worth anything, because the way things are going with this hyperinflation, maybe her, 50 million grand is probably going to be worth nothing in the next year or so. But anyways, there's a lot of money in CRISPR right now. So if you are into genetics and you say CRISPR, and whatever disease it is that you're working on, if you can somehow intertwine it with gene editing, or at least gene manipulation, or at least like the silencing and unsilencing, chances are, you have a much better chance of getting money. If you start talking about using, aspirin to reverse aging, you immediately become a pariah. You have to fund yourself.
Yeah, they're not going to dive into the toxic environment causing the mitochondrial dysfunction. That would be not useful.
In fact, over the years that I've seen, studies like this keep propping up every once in a while. I don't remember seeing a single one that actually was brave enough to say, hold on a second. Autism rates rising, cancer rates rising, Alzheimer's disease, all of these rates of all of these chronic diseases are rising, especially in the young, right? It immediately means it cannot be genetics. What is this mysterious gene that swept through the population in just 20 years? How is this possible, right? None of that this is discussed, right? It says now they're acknowledging the problem finally, because things become too obvious to ignore, but they're still trying to tie it to genes, because if you actually talk about the environment, you're immediately admitting that, if it's the environment, that somebody changed it for the worse. Who did? And then, sooner or later you end up with the two R's, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, or whoever else is pulling the strings.
Remember, I can't remember which Ray episode it was, but I was like, Ray, we're all just like surviving right now, right? Nobody's thriving. And he's like, yeah. And I feel like that's
coping.
Yeah, constantly kind of not considered aspect about what Ray is talking about. Like, our environment sucks so bad that we're all our human potential has been kind of robbed from us from a young age or in utero. In the pure
survival, actually. When was the last time you actually woke up and you felt so thrilled about the potential of your day, right?
Georgi, there may be today, generative energy 81.
Say that again?
Generative energy 81 with you. That was today.
Good. Glad to hear that I'm the only thing keeping the same. But like in general, like, okay, so there may be a few events in the day that you expect, to like, or at least hope you're going to make you feel better, right? Or feel like you're thriving. But in general, is it like more of a dreadful feeling or more like, damn, I need to be careful. I need to, watch my back. I need to all these things to prepare for survival, right? Is all probably occupying, the most of your subconscious thoughts. It's not like, oh, damn, everything is great in the world. I'll wake up today. I'll do nothing all day. I'll go jump in the ocean. Actually, you're not close to the ocean, or are you?
No, right? not even close. No.
Okay, right. So it's more like, okay, what can I do to prepare for the collapse when it comes?
Well, that's why I practice getting under my desk all the time, and I practice drills. I think you're totally
right. Next time, record it from under your desk. I think people appreciate that.
I will do that. I think you're totally right, because a large part of my brain is like when I look at something that I need, I go, do I have two of that? Like, what happens if that thing breaks? Like, will you have a backup of that if that thing that you use every day breaks? Like, that occupies so much of my consciousness, and it's such a waste, like the idea that I won't be able to get something in the future. Therefore, I should spend a lot of time and my money is kind of tight. And so I'm like thinking about like strategies for it's the most waste. It's ridiculous.
This is the life for I think the vast majority of mankind at this point. It's always been the kind of like really dreadful existence for the really poor countries, right? But now it's kind of transferred to the West as well. And, again, so when the thought is things are about to get bad, right? At least that's the general mood. What can I do with the little resources that I have and expend them in the most efficient and effective way possible? It's not, oh, where do I go party today, right? I don't even know. Actually, I don't even know young people anymore that actually in that kind of a mood. Maybe people in college, but those that I know that in college right now, it's nothing like my generation or even my brother's generation. Basically the 20-year-old people that are 20-something that are in college right now, or 18-year-old or something, because they started 18. I would say half of them are probably on some kind of a psychotropic drug, prescription, and the other half are, again, on a psychotropic drug, non-prescription, and a good portion of them are taking both. Yeah. And if they stop, I don't know if you've seen some of the reports on the forum from students saying, like, if I run out of my antidepressant, and the doctor doesn't refill my prescription in the next 24 hours, I will probably kill myself. They feel they have this dreadful feeling that their life is entirely out of their control and there's nothing they can do to bring it back under their control. It's like no matter which aspect of it you touch, it's already kind of like taken over by this entity. Could be an industry, could be like another person, could be the government, right? And it's like it doesn't belong to you anymore.
I agree with you from experience with somebody that is taking those types of drugs. And it's, I actually read that thread because I was interested, and it seems, I think Ray said, like when somebody asked Ray about getting off an SSRI, he was like, it's really hard. And I don't recall Ray saying, like mentioning that something was really hard before, like as a preface for what his answer was. So I thought that was pretty disturbing. Anyways. Okay, let's do one last one and then we'll go into Idealabs.
Pick one. Any of these that caught your eye? The Cyproheptadine?
Yeah.
That was a pretty shocking one.
The 12 milligram?
Yeah.
Got it.
So a person with liver cancer, I would call it stage 4, fully metastasized, I think bones and a few other organs, I think brain as well. At this point, this person's terminal. Once you get to that point once you have bone metastasis, chances are that the doctor will probably start telling you, get your affairs in order and let's get you off of whatever drug whatever chemotherapy or radiation you're doing, and let's give you some happy pills, which is a euphemism for morphine, and kind of like trying to ease your transition is what they call it. And basically, that person had stopped all of these treatments because I think the doctors, if I remember correctly, they were saying that there was no point. And then that person was prescribed 4 milligrams of cyproheptadine taken 3 times daily. Within 2 weeks of doing nothing but that, the cancer was gone. And then they did some imaging, and they basically saw that the lesions had, in almost all of the organs, in other words, the metastases, had healed, except like I think there were like one or two that were still there. They said it may be a good idea to continue doing that. And he stayed, I think he or she, forgot, the patient stayed on the cyproheptadine for a total of 14 months, at which point basically everything was gone, both the primary tumor and the metastases, and none of the biomarkers for liver function came back abnormal throughout the course on cyproheptadine. And I know some people have concerns about cyproheptadine. There's some published case studies that show elevated liver enzymes. It is certainly possible, but on this dosage for 14 months, the liver actually recovered. And by the way, it was liver cancer. So if cyproheptadine is bad for the liver, it should have actually been really bad for the specific person, but it wasn't. If the way I read it, to me, after the first 2 weeks, that person should have been more or less considered cured because the massive primary tumor was gone, and most of the well-formed remote metastatic nodules were also gone. It was only small lesions that were visible only on imaging, basically like a very high contrast imaging studies. Only that was the only way to tell that the person actually had cancer. And even those were gone after a total of, I think, 14 months of therapy. I don't know what to tell you, but other than, if that doesn't prove that serotonin and histamine are carcinogenic, or at the very least promote drastically the development of cancer, then probably nothing will. I mean, it's a one case study, but cyproheptadine has other studies behind, in terms of evidence, even though not necessarily for malignant tumors. It's known to fully cure Cushing disease, which not Cushing syndrome, Cushing disease, which is caused by a tumor in the pituitary gland. And so often, not, I would say about 20-30% of the times, those tumors are not benign. So it's used to actually fully cure those cases. And I think it's also been successfully used for something called Nelson syndrome, which is what happens if you get your adrenal glands removed. The pituitary goes into overdrive because it says, oh, there's no cortisol, and the body says, oh, let's get the pituitary to release a lot of ACTH, right? And it does. And ACTH, elevated ACTH levels in the blood, cause these like large brown spots on your skin, and also cause massive tumors to develop in the adrenal glands and the kidneys. And I think cyproheptadine has a few studies showing that it can actually cure that as well. So it's not an isolated case of, maybe it's just this person reacted uniquely to cyproheptadine. Cyproheptadine has a lot of evidence behind it for doing these kind of things. They're just older studies, and they wouldn't be considered sufficient evidence to recommend it as an anti-cancer treatment. But I think Ray has recommended it for years to people with cancer, mostly for weight management issues, like to prevent or treat cachexia. But now we have evidence, human evidence, that it's can actually cure terminal cases of cancer, at the very least liver cancer.
You kind of touched on it, but I was going to ask, what's so toxic about serotonin or histamine to the liver?
Well, the serotonin causes directly fibrosis of any organ it touches through the 5-HT2B receptor, right? Histamine is actually one of the two legs on which estrogen stands. Histamine and the cholinergic system, these two are basically through which estrogen manifests most of its carcinogenic effects. If you block either histamine or give an anticholinergic drug, which, by the way, cyproheptadine is both. Not many people know, but cyproheptadine is a pretty powerful anticholinergic as well. So if you're giving cyproheptadine, you're essentially fully blocking the effects of estrogen, effectively giving the person anti-estrogen. And we know that estrogen is bad for the liver. In any animal model you pick up, it basically causes enlargement of the liver when used sporadically. And if it's used chronically, even at a lower dose, it causes liver cancer. So cyproheptadine is essentially a full spectrum functional serotonin antagonist or blocker, even though it doesn't actually bind, I think, directly to the estrogen receptors. But as Ray said, the entire cell is the receptor, and it just happens that cyproheptadine blocks entirely estrogen's effects. And then serotonin, basically, oh boy, what doesn't it do? Fibrosis. It's also the primary driver of the fight or flight response, because it gets the pituitary to release ACTH, which, of course, drives up your cortisol. I think over the last couple of months, I've posted quite a few studies showing that cortisol is actually what fattens up the liver. It inhibits oxidative phosphorylation. It activates aromatase, so you're producing even more estrogen, right? So histamine, serotonin, and estrogen. If you can block these three, and that's what cyproheptadine is doing, you're probably blocking the majority of the bad mediators, the cardinal bad mediators in the body. If you can also block cortisol and aldosterone, you're probably 90% there. And if you can block the PUFA downstream effects through cyclooxygenase and lipoxygenase, then you've probably covered pretty much all bases. I mean, there's still little crevices here and there that can go wrong. I mean, you're not blocking 100% of the bad things that can happen to your body, but blocking 99%, it's usually sufficient to allow the organism to restore its energetic homeostasis, and after that, the organism will take care of the rest. You don't have to address every downstream pathway that exists, and we don't know how many exist, right? I mean, there's probably thousands of them that we still don't know about, right? So it's an insanity, which is what medicine is currently doing, to go and chase every single individual downstream pathway. Look at the high level, and the high level is thyroid, right? And then underneath, literally the very next step would be estrogen, histamine, serotonin, prolactin, the prostaglandins, nitric oxide, things like that. And cyproheptadine happens to be able to address most of these.
Yeah, that's something that's difficult about attacking the stress system is what you're saying is there's so many different layers, from the prostaglandins to nitric oxide to parathyroid hormone to prolactin. And my understanding is that those are like different, they've developed at different times, or like what's that called? The history of some chemical, or I can't remember. Whatever.
They have a different evolutionary history, but they're all part of the stress system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And unsurprisingly, usually, I think one of my first posts on the forum was, one of the ways Ray is on the right track is that when he talks about something that promotes a disease, right? Actually, several things that promote a disease, and then you get a substance that opposes one of those, right? And then if you look at those, the way these things are bad is that they always go hand in hand. It's very hard to find a person with high estrogen that doesn't also have high cortisol, high serotonin, high parathyroid, high prolactin, right? They all go hand in hand. They all activate each other's pathways. And conversely, very hard, to get a person something that's really beneficial, let's say like a serotonin antagonist, and that doesn't actually end up normalizing a large part of the dysregulations that are present in the other systems as well. Even substances that are supposed to be exclusively serotonin antagonists. There are many studies on PubMed with animals showing that the 5-HT3 antagonist ondansetron, even though it's not only exclusively a serotonin antagonist, but it's actually an antagonist on only one of the receptors. Mm-hmm. That thing has basically multitudes of studies for like all kinds of things that are obviously systemic nature. It can treat low thyroid function in animals. It can treat hyperestrogenemia in animals. It can treat estrogen receptor positive breast cancer in animals. It can treat bone disease triggered by excessive bone resorption due to hyperlactin and hyperthyroid. And even though it doesn't, medicine will say, well, how does it do this if it doesn't act on those receptors directly? Well, I guess it's the systemic thing. And if you hit one of those systemic mediators and you knock it out of balance, or actually back into balance, the system with sufficient energy manages to rebalance itself. You don't have to address each one of them individually. I know pharma companies would love to, because it means a drug for each pathway, or maybe multiple drugs. But that's not how the body works.
I think I've said this before, but I remember a few years ago, I was looking into prolactin or something. And I was like, oh, well, prolactin goes up when the intracellular sodium gets higher, or the extracellular sodium goes into the cell, and that like triggers the pituitary to release prolactin. And I was like, oh, well, isn't aldosterone called like the salt retaining hormone? So prolactin, if that's higher, aldosterone should follow or whatever. And then that like sent me down a rabbit hole, but that was like completely confirmed by the model. You know what I mean? Like Ray's model allowed me to connect a dot that I had never explored before. And so it's like, this thing is coherent, and it doesn't depend on Ray to understand it. You know what I mean? And
exactly. So if aldosterone is elevated, you would expect prolactin to rise as well. And all you have to do is, that's actually how I used to verify it back in the day. I would say prolactin, aldosterone, in Google or even in PubMed, and immediately studies will come up. Will say like, in these animals that were given spironolactone, which is the aldosterone antagonist, interestingly or unexpectedly or shockingly, their prolactin declined dramatically, right? And they'll say like, we don't know through what mechanism.
Yeah. But that's a very a validating thing to be on the right track, to have a thought that you've maybe never explored before. And it turns out there's tons of papers on it. So I love that. Okay, so let us know about idealabsdc.com. What is new with your company?
In terms of products, we just released quinine, which Ray has mentioned a few times. I think you and I first talked about it. Mm-hmm. Then we told Ray, he said, I'm going to drink tonic water tonight. And I think he then after that, it made him look into it. And then he measured it during a couple of videos as a very broad spectrum anti-inflammatory substance. And basically, he also mentioned it as an ACE2. He measured it as an ACE inhibitor, as a promoter of ACE2, which is a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if he ever mentioned directly in the context of COVID-19, but a few papers are already out there because quinine was the molecule that inspired the synthesis of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine. If you look at them, they're basically the quinine backbone with basically some additional chlorine molecules and some extra hydroxyl groups. But at the end of the day, it's a synthetic bastardized version of quinine. And all of these drugs have now multiple studies behind them demonstrating that they're effective against COVID-19, both due to the anti-inflammatory effect and also due to them basically inhibiting the enzyme that converts angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. And then I also found some additional studies showing that quinine inhibits the enzyme tryptophan hydroxylase. Ray mentioned a few times the drug phenclonine, which basically was used back in the, I think, 60s or 70s to lower brain serotonin, which resulted in a dramatic increase of testosterone in male rats. But basically, quinine is another substance that can do something similar. And on top of that, it's actually an antagonist of several of the serotonin receptors, the 2 and 3. Basically, that's another thing that attracted me to it. And finally, it's several studies that I found recently demonstrated that basically quinine can act similarly to the drug meldonium. So it seems to inhibit the transport of carnitine into the cell and basically may be able to inhibit or at least lower the excessive fatty acid oxidation, which has a multitude of benefits. And if you go on PubMed and search for quinine and a variety of other conditions meldonium has just the same verification process that we discussed a few minutes ago, search for quinine and some disease that you think meldonium is able to treat, and studies start popping up immediately.
And then the toenail steroid testing, what's the status on that?
The steroid testing, basically, currently we can probably do testing for cortisol and DHEA. And we're probably going to start with hair. It turns out the processing of the samples is key. Duh, right? But in order to extract the steroids from the samples, you need to pulverize them into an extremely fine powder. And it turns out that can be done more easily with hair because nail is tough. There's a lot more collagen in it. And basically it will be more difficult to grind into an extremely fine powder. With nails seems to be more to be easier. So we'll probably start by offering the steroid analysis in nails. We may start with cortisol and DHEA, which several studies have shown that the ratio of cortisol to DHEA in both blood and any of the organs, including nail and hair, these things have been tested. That ratio, cortisol to DHEA, is the best predictor known so far of all-cause mortality. You want that ratio to be lower than 10. Multiple studies have shown that during stress, the cortisol to DHEA ratio rises up to 20. After a major surgery, it can go up to 30. And actually, if it doesn't decline back to at least 10 within 48 hours after the surgery, that person usually dies. So it seems to be a very broad, kind of like a biomarker of how well you're doing systemically. The production of DHEA and even the existence of the inner layer of the adrenal gland depends on thyroid, and that layer disappears almost completely with advancing age. But as Ray said, if you're taking thyroid or like a substance that blocks the effects of cortisol or estrogen, that layer can regenerate fully. There's nothing stopping it from regenerating. It's not permanently gone. And basically, so in other words, your DHEA levels, which progressively decline with age, are actually almost a direct indication of your thyroid function, even though doctors think they're an indication of the adrenal function, which they are. But you can have very high cortisol levels, which is still an indication of adrenal function, and very low DHEA levels, right? Which actually is a very good indication of your overall thyroid/metabolic state. So we'll probably start with those 2 steroids. I'm hoping that we may be able to actually do the full panel: cortisol, DHEA, aldosterone, estradiol, testosterone, progesterone, and DHT. Ideally, we're looking at that. Actually, not ideally. That will be the basic panel that we're close to getting done. Cortisol, DHEA, I would say 90% done. The other panel about 75% done. Ideally, and we've bought the analytical standards. We have a panel of 20 different steroids, including things like the intermediates, like 17-alpha hydroxypregnenolone, 17-alpha hydroxyprogesterone, the various 21-deoxycorticosterone and cortisol, the precursors to aldosterone, right? And also the thyroid hormones. So that's next. First, we're doing I don't know what they call it, but let's call them the steroids. They're not entirely sex steroids, but all of these steroids. And then once that is validated, proven to work well, then we're going to add the T3, T4, and reverse T3. And I think that should pretty much cover it. We may try to do T1 and T2 as well, but I don't think they're as important as those 3, the T3, T4, and reverse T3. So excited about it. There's a lot of work because we found out that a lot of the papers that are published on the topic, first, there aren't that many. Mm-hmm. And second, the papers that are published on the topic, they don't describe very well the materials and methods section, what exactly was done. And some of them are basically claiming results that we think, or actually we found out experimentally, are impossible. So we know firsthand a lot of studies lie directly, but we're close. I mean, we do have some results already by testing our own nails and hair, and they seem to correlate well with blood results, at least for cortisol and DHEA. So we know it's doable. It's just a matter of another week or 2 before we have something that can be open to the public to order.
Okay, so nothing to order right now. It's still
nothing to order right now. Still only the minerals. Oh, by the way, speaking of the minerals, we're probably going to have a gap of about 3 weeks starting April 12th. And basically until the end of April, starting April 12th, where we won't be able to do the mineral testing because the section of the university where we're using basically the machine on loan from one of the universities in Bulgaria, they're going to have like basically a renovation there. And since the machine cannot be moved, nobody can go in there for about 3 weeks. So that will be on pause for about 3 weeks. But it was a prelude to the steroid testing anyways. I don't think people miss it that much, and we should be back in, after that, after 3 weeks. So hopefully by then it will be replaced by the steroid testing, and then that will be in the limelight, and the other thing will take the back seat.
Awesome. Okay. I do coaching on patreon.com/Danny Roddy. And then here, let me just talk about the schedule real fast. Okay. So today, Georgi is on April 15th. I'll be doing Q&A. Then the 28th, another episode of Bioenergetic Helpline with my buddies, Jay, Mike, and Harrison. And then April 29th, Ray will be back on with Georgi, and we'll do Generative Energy 83. You completely checked out during this time when I was reading the schedule, Georgi.
Because I'm checking my phone. I keep getting these calls and emails, even though I'm told people don't bother me until 10:30.
Okay, and what I feel like I have something else. Oh, these episodes are not live right now because dealing with my internet is just too much to handle. So I know the whole podcast has been kind of plagued by my bad internet. So we're just going to nip it in the butt and not do these live right now because it's just a bad experience for people watching. So,
and when the collapse comes, we're going to be drawing ourselves on paper and then sending this to people to flip through the pages and reenact the actual episode.
Yeah, once the cyber attack hits and everything powers down, I'll have to drive to Ray's house and do a podcast for just the people watching.
Next time, if we have the episode with Ray, if things don't collapse by then, I'm going to ask him about amateur radio, ham radio.
Oh yeah.
That thing seems like probably the one thing that would be the world will depend for communication because it's these people out in the woods they make their own antennas. They communicate worldwide. They have like all of these networks and whatnot. And if basically the state-sponsored, the centralized means of communication collapses, I don't know what else can be used for like long-distance communication.
Preppers talk about those radios all the time, so that's like that's like a thing in that community. Okay, let's talk about 2-3 more of these and then get out of here because I know it's late and we've been going for about an hour. Okay, why don't we talk about PUFA because that is extremely popular right now.
Which one?
PUFA
cause obesity, diabetes, and all these things.
Uh-huh.
So this is actually a group that's been doing a lot of anti-PUFA studies. I think they're out of the University of Washington, somewhere on the West Coast, as far as I can remember. And they're kind of like, I can't decide if they're controlled opposition or they really mean well, because they publish these damning studies about PUFA, and then they say, oh, it's not really the polyunsaturated fats; it's caused by an unknown factor in these seed oils. Well, what is that factor? Mm-hmm. They've been looking for it for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years, and nothing is published on it. But the actual studies, at least the conclusions are, PUFA is definitely bad. Mm-hmm. It's causing all of these things. And the group, because they have like several groups of like, obviously with animals testing different oils, they're saying the group that actually was on coconut oil did the best. And they never, miss a chance to mention that all of the members of the actual study, the study authors, have switched completely over to eating coconut oil or olive oil. But they're saying like we're done with the PUFA. Said nobody should be eating PUFA. I think they actually say if soybean, there we go. If there is there's one message I want people to take away. It's this: reduce consumption of soybean oil. It's not just soybean oil. In the previous studies, they actually tested canola oil, rapeseed oil, I think cottonseed oil as well. They found the exact same things, and they said still kept repeating it's not the PUFA, but it's some unknown factor. Well, then why are you advising people to stop eating soybean oil? Then say eat soybean oil without that factor, right? So I suspect they're either being told like you can't directly bash PUFA, right? Or there's something else going on. I mean, they maybe they're believers that they refuse to believe that something as benign and widespread as polyunsaturated fats can be responsible for all of these terrible conditions that they're seeing. Diabetes, obesity, heart disease, mental disorders, right? I mean, believe it or not, they're able to test things like anxiety and depression in animals. They're very well established tests. Neurological disease, Parkinson's disease, all of these things. They're saying PUFA is ubiquitous not ubiquitous, but like it's omnipotent in causing any one of these conditions. And they never miss a chance to say, look, our entire group has stopped eating PUFA, and now we're all on butter and coconut oil. Yet they refuse to condemn the actual polyunsaturated fats in the oils. They still keep looking for that unknown, mysterious factor that is present somehow only in those oils, and that's responsible for causing these diseases. So, but I'll take it. I mean, I don't know of any other group, official, publicly, like government-funded scientists in the Western world that are so bravely coming out there and saying, we condemn eating the PUFA, even though we don't think PUFA is the actual bad thing, but you shouldn't eat it. You should eat the saturated fats. So
maybe you send them an email with just one word, cardiolipin.
Yeah, I guess I can do that. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if their official email accounts of the university go through a screening department. Mm-hmm. It's not at this point, I think most people, just like the Twitter accounts, many people think that if they respond to a tweet by, let's say, Barack Obama or like some high-ranking politician, and then a politician responds, it's the politician responding. Very rarely that is the case. Clearly they have an entire PR team that's responsible for handling that account. And I think the same thing is starting to happen in the universities as well, because clearly if like a well-known scientist gets on the record and basically sends somebody an email, says, oh yeah, just between the two of us, I think it's PUFA, you shouldn't be eating it, right? And then it turns out the university is getting like, I don't know, $100 million from Monsanto, one of the biggest producers of pesticides, and also I think of Mazola oil. Clearly that is not going to sit very, very well with the sponsor. So again, I mean, if I can email them, but so far my experience with high-profile scientists is that they either never respond, or if they do, they first go through a barrage of questions like, who are you? Who is your sponsor? Like, who do you work for? Who is your advisor? Who can vouch for you? just for a simple question, like for example, in your study you said X, Y, and Z. Can you what do you think about this other study that says A, B, and C? They will not answer that. They will actually try to vet you first, as if asking a question was only permissible from certain people.
Dude, kind of off topic, but did you hear the interview with Ray and Kate Shanahan and all those people? It's like a roundtable discussion on obesity.
They were actual doctors, right? I mean, I saw that it was posted, but I haven't listened to it. What happened?
I want to talk with him about it when he comes on. It's kind of funny, but it's like minus one person. It's really good. And it's a good.
Except that lady that she was a doctor and she kept basically trying to attack him, right?
No, she's just like everybody is flowing and she's not flowing. So it's just I think she needs a large dose of LSD or something.
Danny, don't do that because they'll accuse you of being a misogynist. Anybody, that's the defense these days.
Any man or woman that acted kind of with her rigid behavior probably needs a large dose of LSD. Okay, so
how about anybody these days needs a large dose of LSD because we're all coping and surviving.
True. Oh, speaking of, okay, so stress, cortisol makes even altruistic people selfish.
Oh yeah, another great study, and basically they kind of like messed it up a little bit because they said this effect is only seen in altruistic people. But I thought, well, look, if a person is already selfish, if a person is already a psychopath, first of all, their cortisol is probably already pretty high. So it'll be very difficult for you to raise it even further, right? And also, if their cortisol has been high for a while, their serotonin has been high for a while, I mean, their brain is already at the point where basically, so a psychopath is a much worse condition than simply being somebody who has become selfish. Used to be altruistic and then they became selfish. Somebody who is already at the psychopathic level, yeah, if you raise their cortisol more, if you even achieve raising it, which I highly doubt, you're not going to see much of an effect. And they didn't compare the two groups. They just compared change from baseline, right? So for the selfish people, yeah, there wasn't any change from baseline because they're already 100% selfish. What more can you get, right? But still, I think the shocking part of the study, and it basically was a drastic decline in the altruism of the altruistic people by simply being exposed to a relatively minorly stressful situation. I wouldn't even call it that stressful. I forgot what it was like. They were shown like some disturbing images. They were put in a situation where basically they described it as mildly stressful. And to me, that's I mean, imagine what happens if somebody is made to fight for their survival, just like as we're now, or like think of like all the bad things that can happen on a daily basis, and that they have to spend their limited resources and most of their waking hours thinking about survival. Then it's a little surprised that Ray said that we're becoming more psychopathic. That's probably why we've been under constant stress, and ultimately it takes its toll on people. And we're turning into these selfish, self-centered, hopefully not yet psychopathic people, but we are on our way. So be aware that stress not only kills, it turns you into an absolute asshole towards the people around you, and the same thing happens to them.
Yeah. Just self-evident, obviously. But did you ever, I'm reading the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and I did do a little bit of investigation on this region of the brain, and it seemed especially sensitive to stress. Have you ever come across anything like that?
I don't know of a region of the brain that is not sensitive to stress, except possibly the amygdala, but only because it's like relatively isolated. It's very deep in the brain, and basically it's not as exposed to the effects of cortisol. But anything like the prefrontal cortex, the hypothalamus, obviously, it's producing the CRH, right? And it's actually, ironically, it's actually sensitive to the CRH it produces. CRH is highly inflammatory and now is recognized as an actual cause of several neurological diseases, including multiple sclerosis. So I think the brain, just like any other soft, actually not just soft, I don't think there's any tissue that cortisol doesn't wreck, as long as it can turn it. Right? I mean, it can be used to convert into glucose or somehow other metabolize into energy, because the brain is mostly fat, but it does have some amino acids. I don't think anything is immune to the effects of cortisol, no matter, except possibly like the very inner regions of the brain, which are responsible for keeping you alive, the brainstem and the amygdala. But even those, I mean, eventually, I think those are the only ones that remain functioning. That's probably the definition of that study that, if you remember, with the locusts, the grasshoppers became locusts. I would like to see them examining the changes in the brain, structural changes in the brain, as a result of that elevated serotonin that they found. If serotonin is high, cortisol is high as well, just as I mentioned. Serotonin is one of the primary activators of the fight or flight response. So not just the dorsolateral, you said. It's any region of the brain in the outer layer of the brain is vulnerable to cortisol. I wouldn't be, there are already studies. So depression driven by cortisol, anti-cortisol drugs are powerful antidepressants. And I think that is basically attacks, it's considered to be mostly driven by the atrophy of the prefrontal cortex. This callous, unemotional state that psychopaths and autistic people tend to be in. I think that's driven by damages to the amygdala and the cerebellum. So obviously those are also vulnerable to cortisol. So yeah, my verdict is forget about specific areas. They're all vulnerable to cortisol, but just like the adrenal layer, there are multiple layers of the brain, and the the one that are innermost are the ones that are vital for your survival, right? But even they will probably disappear if cortisol continues to be to run unopposed. And there are studies, they're actually imaging studies of people who have been under tremendous stress, and they show drastic shrinkage of the volume of the brain. So you are literally eventually running on empty, just like the adrenal gland. The only thing that remains at the very end before the adrenal gland fails fully and you get Addison disease and die, because it's invariably lethal unless you get cortisol, is basically the outer layer, which produces only cortisol. Same thing happens to the brain. When the cortisol basically keeps destroying the brain through years of unopposed activity, eventually you're down only to the amygdala and the brainstem, and the only thing that these things can do is turn you into a zombie. Maybe all these zombie movies are not entirely like off script. They seem to be based on something. Well, I'm afraid to think of what there are probably labs that have done these experiments on people in third world countries run by the CIA. But what was that section on Reddit? Suspiciously specific. Okay. Like when you have the script of the movie start to match life so well, it's probably not a coincidence.
Well, I just watched this. This was this is 1995, so I was 10 years old when this movie came out, and I rewatched it, and I was like shocked how this is predictive programming, or what's it called? There's a word for it. Anyways,
which movie is that?
This is called Outbreak. And it was, it was basically
with the virus, the monkey.
Yeah, there's like nothing different from the response with COVID than what happened in this movie. But
minus the dropping that bomb, the thermobaric bomb on the village, right?
Yeah.
But we'll probably see that in the near future.
Yeah, but it was just crazy because this has been incepted in the brains of people for such a long time. Like this is, I think they, I don't want to speak out of turn here. They use like phrases that were used in COVID, like separating each other and things like that. And anyway,
there's a most recent movie that's actually even more accurate because it was with Matt Damon and Gwyneth Paltrow.
Contagion.
What was it called?
Contagion.
Yeah. That one actually is even more scarier because I think the virus originated in China, and it basically came from a bat, or a bat bit a pig, and then the pig was eaten, and that's what basically started infecting people.
The funniest thing is, I think, I can't remember this actor's name, but he's like a conspiracy theorist. And at the end of the movie, he goes to jail.
Cool.
This character in the film. Oh my God.
In The Contagion?
Yeah. But he's like a Alex Jones like type person. And at the end of the movie, he goes to jail. Oh, Jude Law is his name.
Jude Law. Okay.
Yeah. Pretty funny. Okay. Let's do one more here and then we'll call it a day. Do endotoxin or stem cells?
I would say these are pretty obvious at this point, right? I want something else that's more surprising.
Okay, you tell me.
The list and see. Oh, the vitamin D2 and D3. I wanna wake up the evil spirits because I know that will rile people up. Wasn't there some discussion about D2 being the recommended, like the group that opposes us said that basically if you supplement with anything, it shouldn't be D3, should be D2?
Is that, if that's true, I didn't know that.
Okay. Well, anyways, this thing basically says that even if that is not true, the fact that your doctor actually is only authorized to prescribe you D2 because it's the only form that's approved for oral therapy, You go to a doctor, you get diagnosed with low vitamin D. The doctor will say, okay, I'll prescribe you vitamin D, and they gives you a prescription for vitamin D2, usually at the dosage of 50,000 units once weekly. Right? But this study now says that the vitamin D2 and D3, they basically do not have the same effect on the immune system. And one of the primary reasons in many of the studies, if not most of the studies coming out lately in regards to vitamin D3, are in regards to its immune boosting effects. And specifically, maybe I shouldn't say it, but I will say it, helping with COVID-19, making it, preventing its occurrence, preventing the actual infection, in infected people, making it milder, and in people that end up in the hospital, preventing complications and death. Multiple studies on that, right? And then invariably, the mechanism of action proposed is that vitamin D basically activates the T cells, or at least helps you produce more. One way or another, this study says basically that vitamin D2 does not have this effect, but only D3 does. So basically, they're saying for immune system boosting purposes, one should not be using D2 because it's completely ineffective.
I'm just going to skate by that one real fast. Thanks for that, Georgie. Okay, is there any other one that you really wanted to talk about?
Let's see.
Vegetables, master lactic acid, Alzheimer's, eating meat, exercise bad for dental, aspirin, emphysema, epilepsy, energetic calcium overload.
Let's do the, can you scroll up?
Yeah.
Let's do the lactate.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Yes. So just 48 hours of exposure to slightly elevated lactate levels was basically enough to trigger changes into the whole apparatus of the cell, which is something that I think even as far back as Otto Warburg used to say, that basically if the cell senses that the energy it produces is not sufficient, it will start to dismantle, it sort of cannibalize itself, or at least dismantle the apparatus that it doesn't need, which is the oxidative phosphorylation apparatus. And this study demonstrated that some of these changes are basically visible after only 48 hours of exposure to elevated lactate. And it wasn't even to the point of what doctors would diagnose as lactic acidemia. Or lactic acidosis. It was something that you would see as in like you ran, you went for like a decently long run, not a marathon, let's say 5 or 6 miles. That's the level of lactate that you get when you run that distance. And that's the level of lactate that if maintained for 48 hours, it was enough to start causing pathological changes. And guess what? This kind of lactate that you get after running, so young people can get away with it because their livers are actually really good at processing lactate and turning into glucose, and then that gets metabolized. Mm-hmm. As you age or as your thyroid function declines, that elevated lactate you're getting from any kind of exertion doesn't go away easily. It basically sticks around in your cells and basically can stay there for as long as a week or even 10 days. In fact, it's one of the good measurements of how good your systemic health is. If you remember the methylene blue test, which is basically capable of oxidizing lactate back into pyruvate, and basically since lactate is a reductant, one of the good tests of your systemic health is what dosage of methylene blue do you need in order to start peeing blue. Mm-hmm. And the higher that dosage is before you start peeing blue, the more reduced your overall redox state is. In other words, the more this methylene blue gets used, because the methylene blue, when it gets reduced, it becomes colorless, right? So if you're in a really good oxidized state, you drink that blue methylene blue, right? And if it's not needed, if it's not used, you'll pee out most of it, right? But if you're in a really reduced state, if you have a lot of lactate or other reducing metabolites with a lot of sulfhydryl groups, then basically this methylene blue will get quickly used up, and you'll be peeing it out in its colorless form, and your urine will not turn blue. This has been noticed that in people with advancing age, their lactate can stay elevated for many, many days in a row. And this study showed that even 48 hours is sufficient to already put you on the track of chronic disease such as diabetes and obesity, and in general chronic inflammatory state. And they even say that at this point, lactate is starting to get recognized, just like carbon dioxide. Maybe lactate will get that crown first. But basically, medicine has used to say that there's nothing about lactate and carbon dioxide exciting that deserves studying. They're nothing but metabolic waste products. And I think medicine still maintains that about carbon dioxide, but lactate at this point is starting to get recognized as a major cause of diseases. And I think they have it over there underlined and bolded and colored in red, that the actual authors of the study are agreeing with that statement, and they're making it themselves, and they're doctors. They already say lactate could be a master regulator of carcinoma, right? Of carcinogenesis, but it's not just cancer. For earlier up in the study, they say that it's heart failure, lung failure, kidney failure, all of these degenerative changes seen with the diabetes, with basically disease of the gastrointestinal tract, such as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, steatohepatitis, even cirrhosis. All of these things can have their beginning states that look like something that lactate can produce in just 48 hours.
What did Ray say when we asked him about what was the optimal blood level? Didn't he say like under 1? Or does that ring a bell?
Yeah, and he said that it's you can actually diagnose cancer in people, and he's right. The vast majority of cancer patients that are in really bad state, they arrive at the hospital in something called type B lactic acidosis. And by the way, I would say a good 40% of the cancer patients that are in if the cancer is really not in remission but active and acting up, they actually die from that lactic acidosis. It has a 40% mortality rate even if treated. And he said it could be used as a good test to diagnose if somebody has a really large or extremely aggressive tumor, because they'll have a very very high level of lactate in the blood, way higher than a diabetic. But he said that extreme forms of diabetes, especially type 1, they can actually approach the levels of lactate seen in advanced cancer patients.
Great stuff. Okay. Outro. What are your thoughts? What are you thinking?
Not much. I want to talk to Ray, survive for another 2 weeks, and then we'll see what happens afterwards. It'll be really interesting to see what happens after the war in Ukraine winds down, because the news that I'm hearing from unofficial channels is that essentially the days of the dollar's dominance are over, and there's no telling how this will play out. This is why I think that the elite is really not in control, because they still depend on the dollar, right? And until the digital currency is in place, which I'm not. I mean, they just passed a law instructing the Treasury Department to look into creating a digital currency, unless they're planning of sort of co-opting one of the existing ones, such as Bitcoin, which would confirm many conspiracy theories, right? The Ripple, like the World Economic Forum specifically mentions XRP in some of their documents. So yeah, Ripple could be one of them. They can just say, going forward, this is the only currency that we allow, right? For official transactions. I mean, we'll see what happens. But basically, if the days of the dollar's dominance are over, then we'll probably see true hyperinflation in the U.S. before the end of the year. So, I mean, just to speculate, what do you think the story will be of 2022? The story of 2022? Towards the end of 2022, if we don't have World War III, I would say basically the demise of the dollar, or like civil unrest in the United States. Or actually, not just the United States, in most civil unrest in one or more of the highly developed countries, either due to shortages, which they'll blame on the war in Ukraine, right? Or due to some kind of a currency collapse. It doesn't have to be the dollar. I think the dollar, I mean, the financial shenanigans that the empire players can perform, they will probably throw some other currencies under the bus before the dollar collapses. But it's because the Western world, and in general the world, is still so interlinked. If the British pound collapses, or if the French franc collapses, or if the euro collapses, that still is sufficient to cause a large-scale civil unrest in a developed country, which will probably spread to other areas of the Western world. So I think that will be the all three of them are interconnected. I don't think one can happen without the other. Which one will happen first is, to me, is the real question. So some kind of a collapse or significant degradation of the lifestyle or of the civilizational levels of the Western world. And I don't think that digital currency adoption will prevent that.
And you were prescient, and you called the war. When do you remember when that was? Maybe like late 2021 or early
Yeah,
2022?
something like that. I just thought that they were running out of options. I mean, basically, once I started seeing that the restrictions started getting somehow suspiciously quickly lifted and removed and backtracked on things that I thought basically like were already done deal. I mean, the Austrians, the 1/3 of Austrians, actually 1/5, and 1/5 of Germans that remained unjabbed, they didn't have that many options. I mean, it was almost game over for them. And suddenly everything started getting removed. And I personally thought that the reason the war was started was that some of the technologies underpinning the Great Reset, specifically the artificial intelligence, I personally think it's a bust. I don't think the elite was not smart enough to realize that through artificial general intelligence on a digital computer is impossible. In fact, there is a mathematical proof for it, ironically done in the 1950s by a Russian. But of course, we don't trust those Ruskies, so why would we take anything that these people did? It was probably some kind of a subversion effort to get us to believe something fake, something false. Anyways, but the fourth industrial revolution is almost entirely dependent on the assumption that artificial intelligence will take over, right? And most of the plebs will be unneeded, hence the culling and everything else. If they have kind of gotten their eyes open that the general artificial intelligence is not happening anytime soon, or at least not on a digital computer, then they may have said, "Oh my God, we still need the slaves. We better stop killing them." And then all of the damage that was done so far, right? So you can't just undo it. What's the other option? You can blame it on something else, right? Can do another virus, because obviously this is it's kind of like your bluff has already been called, or at least people are already aware that this is collapsing. So the only other option is war. I mean, it wasn't really calling. It's like, what else would you do? You can blame all the destruction done so far. What else can you do other than war? I didn't expect it would be Russia. I thought it would be like in the Middle East, they'll start a war with Iran, or like maybe like a skirmish. I mean, maybe like foment another Arab Spring event. As I mentioned Lebanon earlier in the podcast, there's a real big issue there with food and financial resources and electricity. So I thought that's their default region. If the United States or Western Europe wants to make itself look good to its citizens, or at least show them how much better they have it than the rest of the population, over the last 20 years, hasn't it been the Middle East? Basically, you want to start a war, you start it there. It's the one region that basically almost no other of the world powers would really like have anything against you starting a war there.
With that, and Georgi, we'll get out of here. So let me just go over the schedule one last time here. Okay, so me on the 15th for a Q&A, 28th bioenergetic helpline, and then Georgi, Ray, and I back on the 29th. And guys, thank you so much. I was excited we took the month off because I kind of felt burned out, but I'm excited to be back and missed these. And thank you so much, Georgi, for being my partner in crime. And with that, we'll get out of here. Thank you again, Georgi. Always a pleasure. And thank you to our amazing audience for listening to the show. See you guys all soon. Have a great weekend. Peace out.